You know how people say that nothing really interesting ever happens in apartment complexes? Just rows of identical doors. People who nod at each other in the elevator but don't remember names. And maybe the occasional awkward fire drill or Amazon mix-up. That was pretty much my life for the better part of my late 20s. I lived on the 6th floor of this beige, slightly overpriced but conveniently located apartment building in Arlington, Virginia. Close enough to DC for my commute. Far enough that I could still pretend I wasn't a total slave to city life. It was the kind of place where you heard neighbors but rarely saw them. Footsteps above, muted conversations through too thin walls, but faces, those were rare. My routine had settled into a kind of quiet monotony. Wake up at 6:45, shower, pour some of that industrial-tasting drip coffee I convinced myself was artisanal, and catch the 8:03 metro to Farragut North, work all day in my cubicle, marketing analytics for a mid-size firm that sold health software to hospitals. Then back home, maybe a podcast on the way. Sometimes I cooked, sometimes I didn't. My fridge had a rotation of lazy weeknight meals and craft beer I bought with the vague idea of having friends over. I wasn't unhappy, but I wouldn't have called myself happy either. There was someone though, Carla. We'd been casually seeing each other for about 2 months. She worked in political communications, super sharp, a little intense in that I don't sleep because I care about causes kind of way. We met at a mutual friends game night. She beat me at code names and told me my sense of humor was sneakily decent. I liked that. She wasn't really in my life, not deeply, but I could see the possibility of something there, and that was enough to keep me curious. So on February 14th, Valentine's Day, I figured, why not do something nice? Not a grand gesture, just something thoughtful. I ordered flowers online. Nothing too showy, just a soft pink bouquet with some lavender and baby's breath tucked in. I figured it was a safe move, sweet but not overwhelming. It was the middle of a hectic workday. I remember I had 3 meetings back to back and hadn't even finished my lunch. In that kind of frazzled state, I typed her address into the delivery form. Her building was across the river in Georgetown. Same setup as mine. Floors stacked like Tetris blocks. Apartments labeled in letters and numbers. I'd only been to her place twice, but I remembered it well enough. Or so I thought. I swapped 2 numbers in her apartment unit. Instead of 804B, I typed 840B. Didn't realize it. Didn't double check. Hit submit. Got the email confirmation. And then I went back to battling spreadsheets and making slides for a pitch I barely understood. I figured she'd text me when they arrived. A simple thank you. Maybe a smiley face if I was lucky. But the afternoon came and went. No message. I even double-checked to see if I'd sent them to the right place. The address looked familiar enough. I shrugged it off. The next day, still nothing. And here's the thing about modern dating. Silence is louder than rejection. You don't always get a clear no. Sometimes you just get absence. A quiet slipping away. It's like trying to hold fog in your hands. By day 3, I'd made peace with it, more or less. I figured maybe she thought it was too much. Maybe she had second thoughts. Maybe she was dating someone else too. It sucked, but I wasn't devastated. Just disappointed in that muted adult way where you kind of smirk and tell your coworkers you're totally over it while secretly replaying everything in your head on the metro ride home. That Friday evening, I came home later than usual. Cold rain had started to fall, and the sidewalk shimmered with the kind of grimy beauty that only winter in DC can produce. I tossed my coat onto the chair by the door, dropped my bag, and was just starting to reheat some Thai leftovers when I heard a knock. Not the kind of knock you get from UPS or someone asking for signatures. It was light, hesitant, curious even. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and just a woman stood there, probably around my age, holding a vase of flowers, the same flowers I'd ordered. I recognized the purple wrapping instantly. She had dark hair, tied up in a loose bun, a slightly oversized navy cardigan over jeans, and these thick glasses that somehow made her eyes seem both warm and incredibly sharp. She smiled, just a soft lift of the corner of her mouth, and said, "Hey, these showed up at my place a couple days ago. I almost threw them out, but they were too pretty. Figured I'd try to find the right person." I blinked, dumbfounded. For a second I thought maybe she was from a delivery service or some kind of prank. Then it clicked. I glanced at the tag still hanging limply from one of the flower stems. Yep, my handwriting, my message, my screw-up. I laughed, awkwardly. Those were for someone else. Someone who, never responded. She tilted her head and gave me the kind of look that wasn't pitying, just honest, like she understood without needing the whole story. She said, almost to herself. Their loss. And just like that, she turned to leave. But before she did, she looked back over her shoulder and added with a quick smile, "You've got good taste though. If you ever need help picking out flowers again, I'm right down the hall." And then she was gone. I stood there, barefoot on my cheap rug, holding these now twice-delivered flowers like they were some ancient artifact. Part of me wanted to call someone, tell someone, but who would I even explain that to? "Hey, I accidentally delivered flowers to the wrong woman, and she might be kind of wonderful? I didn't even know her name, but I knew one thing: she made the silence feel different. And that was enough to keep me awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying her voice in my head. I didn't sleep much that night, not in a dramatic tossing and turning kind of way, but in the quiet, buzzing kind of insomnia where your brain just won't shut up. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there, rain speckled on her glasses, cardigan sleeves pushed up, holding those flowers like they were both a mystery and an offering. It wasn't just that she was attractive, though she was. It was something in her tone, the calmness, the simple grace of what she did. She hadn't needed to track down the sender. Most people would have just chucked the bouquet in the trash and called it a day, but she didn't. She came back. The next morning, I stared at the flowers still sitting on my counter, now slightly wilted from all their travel. And without thinking too hard, I opened my laptop, ordered a new bouquet, yellow tulips this time, simple, hopeful, and wrote a small note: "Thought you deserved your own." I didn't even know her unit, but I had the miss-sent one, 840B, and she'd said she was right down the hall, so I guessed 842B, and crossed my fingers. It was a Saturday, gray and quiet. I spent the day cleaning up, doing laundry, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It felt ridiculous to feel so moved by such a small encounter. But I also knew myself well enough to know that I don't normally feel much, at least not lately. That evening, as I was microwaving dinner, I saw something slip under my door. I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. It was a sticky note, bright pink, probably from one of those little office packs. In looping cursive it said, "Do you send flowers to all your neighbors, or was I just lucky?" I sat down on the floor with the note in my hand and let out a quiet laugh, a real one. It had been a while since I'd laughed like that, like something genuinely cracked through the fog. Her note felt like the most unexpected gift, not just because it meant the flowers got to her, but because it meant she wanted this to keep going. Even just a little, even just a flicker. The next day I left a small card outside 842B. No flowers this time, just a note. Lucky. Definitely lucky. Coffee sometime? I wasn't expecting anything. Not really. But she opened her door just as I was turning to walk away. "I was hoping you'd say that," she said. Her name was Emily, and in that moment, everything that had been heavy, the failed maybe relationship with Carla, the monotony of my job, the quiet loneliness that sat in my apartment like a second coat of paint, shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. We grabbed coffee at this cozy little place called Corner Cup down on Clarendon Boulevard. The kind of shop with mismatched mugs and acoustic playlists and too many Edison bulbs. We sat by the window. She ordered a chai latte with almond milk. I got my usual black. No cream, no sugar. We talked, and talked, about books. She was rereading The Goldfinch. I admitted I'd started it 3 times and never finished. About work. She was a UX designer for a nonprofit focused on accessible tech. About family. About growing up. About how weird it is to be 30 and still not feel like you've figured anything out. The 2.5 hours we spent there felt like 15 minutes. And when we left, I walked her back to her door. No pressure, no big moves, just a kind of easy electricity between us. That was the day the Carla situation officially dissolved in my mind. I didn't hear from her again. No text, no sorry I ghosted, just digital silence. And you know what? I didn't care anymore, not in a bitter way, just in a quiet, freeing kind of way. Because Emily was real, present, funny, thoughtful. She listened with her whole face, nodding gently, brow furrowing when something moved her. And when she laughed, it was the kind that made you want to say the next thing just to hear it again. It was just coffee, I kept telling myself. But it wasn't. It was like my life, which had been stuck on mute, suddenly clicked back to stereo. We saw each other again that week. A walk through the park, a late-night Target run where she insisted the best snacks were peanut M&Ms and kettle corn. We started texting. Nothing too intense, just small things. A meme, a song, a picture of the moon from her window. Every interaction was light, easy, but it all felt so vivid. Like I'd been living in black and white and someone had quietly added color without telling me. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, I realized I hadn't thought about work in days. My usual Sunday dread didn't show up. My Spotify was full of happy playlists instead of lo-fi instrumentals to numb the office grind. And I found myself doing little things again, buying fresh fruit, actually folding my laundry instead of letting it live in a basket, walking the long way home just because it was sunny. I felt awake. I felt interested in things again. But it wasn't just Emily. It was how she made space for me, without asking for anything, without putting on any pressure, just by showing up, just by noticing. And then on March 5th, exactly 3 weeks after that knock on my door, I woke up to a text from her. "There's a food truck festival in Rosslyn today. Want to pretend we're food critics?" That afternoon we shared dumplings, banh mi, tacos, and something called a sushi burrito that honestly shouldn't have worked but did. She rated everything with overly serious criteria and made me laugh until I spilled hot sauce on my jeans. We sat on a bench afterward, sipping overpriced iced tea, and watched a little kid chase pigeons around the plaza. She said, "Sometimes I think the universe just intervenes. Just enough, like a little nudge." I didn't say anything, but I believed her. Because somewhere between a wrong address and a sticky note under my door, I'd felt it too. A nudge, and I was finally starting to lean into it. It's funny how something good can still shake you up. We're used to associating fallout with loss, with destruction, but sometimes it comes after something quietly beautiful. Like when your routine collapses not from heartbreak, but from the strange tenderness of being seen. Emily didn't demand space in my life. She didn't insist on redefining things or pressing boundaries. But just by existing, by choosing to show up and talk and care, she made everything I had been tolerating suddenly feel inadequate. And that was a kind of emotional earthquake I wasn't ready for. At first it was subtle. I started noticing things. How little I called my parents anymore. How long it had been since I wrote anything just for myself. How much of my life had become centered around being productive but not really living. The last time I'd taken a weekend off just to explore or even sit in the park without guilt, I couldn't remember. It hit me one Sunday morning. I was standing in the cereal aisle of the Safeway down the block. Emily had texted to say she was heading to her sister's for the weekend and wouldn't be around until Monday. I was just grabbing groceries, something I did every week, same time, same list. But I caught myself staring blankly at the shelves, thinking, what am I even doing? There were 3 versions of myself pulling in different directions. There was the default me, the one who hit the alarm clock, clocked into meetings, posted quarterly goals in Slack threads, and didn't ask questions. Then there was the ghosted me, the one who had grown used to being half considered in people's lives, the afterthought, the backup plan. That part of me was terrified to believe Emily might actually care. And then, there was the new me, the one waking up early to make pancakes just because it made her smile, the one who started journaling again, who caught himself smiling for no reason in the elevator, who bought fresh-cut flowers for the kitchen even when she wasn't around, just because they made the place feel softer. But when those 3 selves collided, the result was chaos. Emotionally, I was cracking open in ways I didn't expect. I started to dread Monday mornings in a new way. Not because of work, but because the contrast between what I felt on weekends with her and what I felt during the week became unbearable. My job, once tolerable, began to feel like sandpaper against my soul. The endless slides, the Zoom calls with people talking in jargon, the synthetic enthusiasm about ROI and A/B testing, it all rang hollow now. And there was guilt too, because I'd let so much of my life slip into autopilot. I had friends I hadn't seen in months, conversations I'd let fade, and a version of myself I'd abandoned years ago without even realizing. One night around the end of March, I sat alone in my apartment, lights spilling in from the hallway, and started scrolling back through old photos on my phone. There was one from 2018, me at the Shenandoah Overlook with college friends, grinning, beer in hand, eyes lit up with some kind of reckless joy I couldn't even remember feeling. I stared at it for a long time. That guy felt like a stranger. I started texting people I hadn't talked to in years, old roommates, college buddies, even my cousin in Seattle I used to be close with. The messages were awkward at first, just little "hey, thought of you today" notes, but I needed to do it. I needed to feel that I hadn't just been drifting through the past 5 years in a haze. And then there was my mom. We'd always been close, but over time the phone calls had shrunk down to 5-minute check-ins. "You doing okay?" "Yeah, work's fine?" "Yep," that kind of thing. But one night I called her out of the blue. It was past 10, which I never did, and when she answered, surprised, I just said, "I missed your voice." We ended up talking for almost an hour. About nothing, about everything. She asked if I was seeing anyone, and for the first time in forever, I didn't hesitate. "I think I'm starting to," I said. "And she's different." I could hear the smile in her voice. But even as I felt that warmth spreading in parts of my life that had gone cold, there was another weight forming, a subtle fear. Because the closer I got to Emily, the more I realized how deeply I wanted this to be real. And when you want something that badly, the stakes feel impossibly high. One weekend, in early April, we were walking through Theodore Roosevelt Island, watching the cherry blossoms blow around like confetti, and I caught myself thinking, please don't let this be one of those fleeting things. Please don't let me screw this up. That kind of thought sits heavy on your chest. It's not that anything bad happened between us. Quite the opposite. Things were unfolding like a slow-blooming story. She'd send me photos of her dog when she visited her parents in Maryland. I'd leave her favorite tea bags by her door when she had a rough week. We had rhythm. We had ease. But that was the problem. When things are good, truly good, they shine a light into all the dusty corners of your life, and suddenly, you see how much you've neglected, how much you've postponed healing, how deeply you've let yourself believe that maybe this kind of connection wasn't for you. I didn't tell her all of this. Not yet, but it started to show. I became a little quieter, a little more cautious. I'd overthink texts, worry about saying the wrong thing. Not because she made me feel insecure, but because I didn't know if I deserved this. There's a strange fallout that happens when hope returns after a long absence. It's not immediate joy, it's fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, you're finally being handed something beautiful. and you won't know how to hold it. There's a moment somewhere between fear and clarity, when you realize the only way forward is through. It came to me one late night in April. I couldn't sleep again. I'd fallen back into the habit of lying on the couch with the TV playing in the background, muted. The apartment was dark, save for the flickering blue light of a rerun of Parks and Rec that I'd seen a dozen times. Outside, the hum of the city softened into its after-midnight rhythm. I felt like I was floating above my own life. And that's when it hit me. I was doing it again. I was building a wall between myself and something good. Not out of cruelty or indifference, but out of fear. A survival reflex from all the half-starts and unfinished stories before Emily. I had grown used to preparing for exits instead of beginnings. But Emily wasn't leaving. She had never given me a reason to doubt her. And yet, I was already rehearsing how to let go of something I hadn't even fully let myself hold. That night, I opened a notebook I hadn't touched in months. It had a half-finished to-do list from last November on the first page. I flipped to the back and wrote 3 words. Let it happen. The next morning, I walked down to 842B and left her a note. Nothing fancy, just a card with a hand-drawn flower on it, and a simple line. Dinner, my place, no takeout, I'll actually cook. Friday? She said yes. That Friday, I cleaned my apartment like I was trying to impress the queen. I lit candles, real ones, not the vanilla-scented ones you hide in the bathroom, but actual soy wax ones I found at this little artisan shop she liked. I spent 2 hours trying to cook something from a recipe I barely understood. Lemon butter chicken, roasted vegetables, and some kind of wild rice that smelled like autumn. She showed up with a bottle of wine and a playlist on her phone. For cooking disasters, she said with a grin. I told her I had already used every clean dish in my cabinet. She laughed, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and said, then it'll taste better. We ate on the couch, plates on our laps, legs folded under us. It wasn't perfect. The rice was undercooked. The vegetables were a little burnt, but she said it was the best meal she'd had all week. At some point, I looked over at her, curled up in my hoodie, sipping wine from a mason jar, and I realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours, hadn't thought about work, hadn't worried about the next day or what this meant or where it was all going. I was just in it, and that for me was the beginning of everything. After that night, something shifted inside me. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started doing things I'd put off for years. I signed up for a creative writing workshop on Sundays. I reconnected with my cousin in Seattle, and we started having weekly FaceTimes. I reached out to my dad, who I'd barely talked to since the divorce, and asked if he wanted to grab lunch the next time he came through town. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was just peeling back the parts I'd buried under layers of caution, and Emily saw it happening in real time. She never pushed, never demanded more than I could give, but when I told her I'd started writing again, she left a notebook by my door with a post-it that said, "Thought you might need a backup when inspiration strikes." When I told her I was thinking about leaving my job, maybe looking into something more aligned with writing or storytelling, she didn't flinch. She just said, "That sounds like the you I met." It wasn't about her fixing me. It wasn't some fairy tale where the right person magically cures everything. It was just this: she gave me room to be whole, to feel everything, good and bad, and still stay. And I started doing the same for her. She had her own ghosts, her own walls, stories about college heartbreaks, and friends who faded, and dreams she'd tucked away for more sensible goals. There were nights she'd come over in sweatpants, hair messy, eyes tired, and just lay on my chest, not saying a word for an hour. And I learned how to hold silence. We built something out of tiny intentional moments, grocery runs where we debated brands of almond milk, lazy Saturdays spent rewatching The Office, long walks without headphones, her teaching me how to fold a fitted sheet badly, me teaching her how to throw a football, also badly. One weekend in May, we took a trip out to Shenandoah. We hiked, took Polaroids, and ended up watching the sunset from the same overlook I'd seen in that old photo from 2018. I showed her that photo. She looked at it for a long time, then handed it back and said, "You still have that smile. You just needed a reason to use it again." And just like that, the last part of me, the one that still braced for loss, began to breathe again. There was no grand declaration, no "I love you" shouted in the rain, just quiet consistency, just showing up. And maybe that's what love really is. Not fireworks, but follow through. A year later, almost to the day, I woke up early and walked down the hallway to 842B. Same building, same hallway, but everything felt different. I had a bouquet in my hand, yellow tulips, her favorite. Not roses, not lilies, just tulips, soft and uncomplicated, like her laugh when she's not trying to impress anyone, like the way she ties her hair up with a pencil when she's working, like how she says, "I don't need a special reason to like something, I just do." I left the tulips at her door with a new note. Still the best wrong turn I ever made. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. She'd find them. And I knew I'd hear from her before noon, probably with a sarcastic remark or a heart emoji or both. Maybe she'd slide another note under my door. Maybe she'd just show up with coffee and say, "Okay, now it's your turn to pick the movie." It's been a year. And no, our lives haven't become some picture-perfect rom-com montage. There have been fights, small mostly, the kind about miscommunication or long days or differing opinions on which side the toilet paper roll should face. There have been tired silences and awkward pauses and mornings when neither of us felt like talking. But what we've built together is not about perfection, it's about intention. It's about the fact that she still teases me about typing the wrong address. About how we still laugh every time we pass that floral shop in Clarendon. About how, when she's had a rough day, she'll curl up on the couch and say, "Can you just tell me that story again? The one where I saved you from your own dumb delivery mistake?" I do. Every time. Because it reminds me of where we started. A mistake. A mix-up. One wrong number. And I think about how easily that day could have gone unnoticed. If she had thrown the flowers away. If I had never followed up. If either of us had decided, it's not worth it. But she didn't. And I didn't. And somewhere between the wrong apartment and the right words, we found something that stuck. Some days I still can't believe it. That a year ago, I was sitting on this same couch, staring at a bouquet meant for someone else, wondering if I had just embarrassed myself. That I was seconds away from tossing it all away, writing it off as another blip in the long timeline of forgettable dating mishaps. And now, I can't imagine my apartment without her mismatched mugs, or that weird green throw blanket she insists is cozy, not ugly. I can't imagine a weekend without our long walks, or late-night movie debates. I can't imagine buying flowers and not thinking of her. They say the universe doesn't make mistakes, just reroutes. And maybe that's true, because I wasn't looking for love when she knocked on my door. I was just trying to be decent, to show a little kindness to someone I wasn't even sure liked me back. But kindness, as it turns out, is a seed. And sometimes, when you plant it in the wrong place, it grows into something even more beautiful than you planned. I keep that original note she wrote me, the one she slid under my door. It's folded up in a book by my nightstand, between pages I never finished reading. Sometimes I pull it out just to remind myself how wildly uncertain, how beautifully chaotic life can be. We still take things slow, no pressure, no future maps sketched in ink, but I know what she means to me. And I know that if I ever forget, all I have to do is look down the hall. 842B. That number used to mean nothing, now it means everything.